Hello everybody and welcome to today's video. And in this video we're going to be discussing the Ouroboros of the Bible. Okay? Now, I'm pretty sure a lot of people are familiar with this symbol, the Ouroboros, the serpent eating its own tail. And I'm going to demonstrate how the Ouroboros is basically I would like to say, the skeleton of what the Bible is and what the Ouroboros is from my perspective. Now, this symbol goes all the way back to ancient Egypt, and it's found through many different cultures, and its connection to death, rebirth, and regeneration. And there's other ways. We look at this like the wheel of time, the samsaric cycles of basically of what this is. And what's also very interesting is anytime a snake actually eats its own tail, it demonstrates that there's something wrong going on, okay? Because it's basically you just keep recycling yourself. You just keep regenerating yourself. You just keep repeating the same patterns, okay? Now, and you notice too, I have a pi symbol here. I'm going to demonstrate why I have pi here and its connection to basically what this is. Okay, so let's move over here, and I want to discuss from the biblical perspective of how we can see the Ouroboros within the framework of the biblical narrative. Okay, so from the biblical narrative and story, okay, we have let's just say we have Lucifer, right? Lucifer, which is, the Bible paints Lucifer, he's like the perfect angel that God created, and he's the light bearer, he holds the light, and basically he wanted to be God. He wanted to be the source, even though he held the light of source, but he himself wanted to be worshipped. Okay, now this sets a interesting situation. Now imagine, so again back to pi, which is what a circle. Let's see if that works. Let's see. Sometimes it lets me create a better circle, but that's okay. So what ends up, he basically warred against, and the war in heaven, him and a third of the angels. Right? They fell from heaven. It's a slice of pie, okay? And that's basically what I want to talk about. You are a slice of pie, the monad, right? In Gnosticism and some other texts, they talk about the monad, the center, the eternal mind, the thing that contains all things. And the Bible would be a sliver, a slice of the pie playing out in a simulation. It is a fallen projection of the mind. So here, I'll draw another. So imagine this here. And this slice here, right, it creates a spiral, okay? It's basically it's a mind, or a part of the mind falling from itself. So Lucifer rebelling against the center of the monad caused a part of the mind to fall into a simulation, right? The war in heaven, and then they came down. And the Bible is basically the story of this fall and how it generated this material matrix and became this world. And this is why they say Satan is the god of this world. And Satan is the dragon. So it's really how Lucifer becomes the dragon. Right? And a lot of people would say Lucifer was a seraphim angel. He guarded, right, the throne of God, right? He was a shining one. You're supposed to be a protector. So what's interesting is, like, seraphim sounds like sheriff to me. And, like, technically sheriffs throughout the land are supposed to help, enforce, the Constitution and natural law of the land, versus these these corporatized, militarized police forces and things that we have, right? But this isn't a video about politics. This is just about the fall from the mind into the material matrix. So, and one thing about the Bible is it doesn't lay these things out. It's kind of mixed all over the place. Okay? And the thing to realize about the Bible is it was put together. It's a bunch of different schools of thought. That's why a lot of scholars, they label different parts of the Bible based off of how it was written and how it was merged together into a single text. I think they break it down into 4 different type of sources. Okay. But again, I want to look at things from a totally different perspective. And if, we can look at the history of how this book was put together, of it, just a bunch of people working on it. But what's interesting about it is you have a bunch of minds through time. So you have all these people throughout a timeline that are working on this book. Imagine this book. This book is a box. Okay? This book is a box. And there's many people through the timeline of this cube. They're working on this. They're putting all the pieces together. So it's a bunch of minds working to put this together. They're trying to create the text, which is like a code base. Because what's interesting, if you really think about this, is a bunch of minds are projecting and creating this thing. So imagine a laser. This is how we create processors and things. It's a laser imbuing and creating a type of stone, okay? They're crafting. So the Bible is an attempt at the production of the philosopher's stone, or a mind, or basically of trying to understand its eternal self. This is why the Bible, have you seen where it shows all the different cross where basically the Bible's constantly referencing itself? Now, what is this? So even in artificial intelligence and more advanced, in which I believe we're already moving in that direction, it's a self-referencing pattern, right? It's a pattern that continually references itself. And it creates an algorithm. It creates a program where basically it creates a holographic kind of template of how a mind is reverberating through itself. It's basically a container. So imagine, when Lucifer falls, he falls, that is equivalent to, say, like a drop of water hitting a pool, and it reverberates, right? So you started up here from eternal source, you fall, you ripple into the darkness, and it creates an algorithm. So as he fell as Lucifer, the angel, and then he shows up again in Genesis as the serpent in the garden. Okay? So Lucifer is the serpent in the garden. And the garden is, again, it's its own mind. Now, instead of we need to strip down and look at these texts not as, they might have some actual literal things in there, but we need to see this. The most important thing is you have to put yourself in the right perspective to really gather and begin to know and understand what is actually happening within this text. So Lucifer falling from the mind, a piece of the mind, a third of the mind, a slice of pie falling from itself into an artificial construct or matrix, which is the genesis or genes of man. So Lucifer falling from the mind into a simulated reality becomes the seed of man. So from the dragon, this is also connected to the seed of man, or of humans. And I'm going to walk you through how this is connected to the Ouroboros of the Bible and of a mind trying to basically the Bible demonstrates. It's basically it generates a matrix, it cannibalizes itself, it gets destroyed, and then it goes through the same process. So it's a mind falling, and it goes through a process, it destroys itself, and then, it wants to keep looping through this. It is a eternally looping Fibonacci spiral, eating itself, destroying itself, and regenerating itself. And that is the structure of the Bible, and everything else attached to the Bible, all the stories, the narratives, the gloss, that is the flesh on the skeleton. That is the operating system. That is the parts of the skeleton that bring it to life. And that is the skeleton from the framework and perspective of the Bible, and how it is connected to this artificial simulated reality. That this reality and is basically more of the dream than where we actually come from. We come from a real, true reality fallen into a simulated artificial matrix. And this artificial simulated matrix wants to keep you cycling through itself, right? It feeds off of you. So in a way, this matrix, so Lucifer would be the light. Lucifer is the light. Eating itself. Basically, Lucifer is the light being eaten by the dragon, which is, I see the dragon as a 4D holographic matrix. That basically takes this light. It takes the light of the mind. It's basically trying to cannibalize it to keep. This is what generates the holographic coding of reality. This is why I like the Fibonacci spiral and the golden means and all. We see the fractal aspects of our reality. This creates the material matter. The dragon, the fourth dimensional intelligence of this matrix, of this material world, is trying to keep the angels, which was led by Lucifer, repeating in a certain type of pattern. And the angels falling from heaven get locked into people, and which became a prison, right? Remember, the angels would be thrown into prison, right? Into Tartarus. And basically, symbolically, this represents parts of the mind being locked into a program. This is why, this is where the person comes from. So in the garden, when you have Adam and Eve being tempted, so if you really look at this, so Lucifer would be like a photon. So you have the mind here, and it's like it's a fallen light. So Lucifer's a fallen angel, which is an angle of light, which is basically, another word we can use is photon. So imagine a photon. It's falling. This photon is falling from the mind. And in the story, Eve talking to the serpent and eating of the tree of knowledge of good and evil, this is all about this photon of light from the eternal place, this source of all things. So you have an atom, so you have Adam, which is, you have electrons. Versus, we talk about, reality being a fractal. We tell things from our perspective, and we project what we are onto the things around us, but it also, we can deconstruct just what we are and get a deeper meaning of it. So like atom would actually be like a literal atom. So we'll say like a carbon atom, for example, which is what? 666, correct? So Lucifer, the light of the mind, falls, and he tempted Eve. Eve was made from what? Adam's rib. What is the rib of an atom? It is the electron cloud. So this is a photon merging into the electron cloud of an atom, right? To play out a simulation. It's basically light coming into matter to experience itself. So it's the light of the mind falling into matter, into a material matrix to experience itself. And we see this story in Genesis, which created the genome of man. And that genome of man, of the material matrix, again, creates the story. Because what ends up happening, basically, before this fall, so this fall was always going to happen, and how it happened in the garden. It's like, hey, don't eat of the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. See, when you have knowledge of good and evil, so this creates polarity, good, evil. This creates. See, this is the serpent. He's got his little mouth here. Part of my drawing. He's got a little, but it is the sine wave, and it is the serpent. Even like in Norse mythology, you have the serpent, the world serpent that encircles the world. And I've actually had a near-death experience, and I met, and I went into, and I met this kind of multidimensional dragon, and it wanted to eat me. Because again, it's a matrix that wants to keep cannibalizing and looping itself. Okay? And this is basically, again, it demonstrates the foundation of how this reality works, of how it keeps creating and destroying and regenerating itself ad nauseum. And basically, so taking of the fruit of the knowledge of good and evil, what ends up happening is, what's also interesting, so when this happens, Adam and Eve get kicked out of the garden. So the garden would be like the mind. It's it simulates what happened in the mind first. So Lucifer rebelling in heaven, this is a more of an abstract view of like the light falling from the mind. And then it gets materialized as the garden story as Adam and Eve. And Eve being tempted by the serpent, it's not an actual serpent, it's a part of the mind. It's the feel. Basically, it's accepting information outside of itself. It's taking this information, and it's basically saying, this is like, again, the flesh wanting to be worshipped. It's like wanting to be eternal, right? It's this whole idea of wanting to live forever. And the serpent tempts Eve. It's like, well, you eat it, you won't die, right? You eat of this knowledge of good and evil, you won't die. But, they doing that, they get tempted and they fall into this matrix of this serpent. This is all about the mind falling into a material matrix, and then you become a slave to that matrix, which the matrix, the fourth dimensional holographic matrix that we live in, is the dragon, right? It is a dragon that is a reflection of the coding of man in the box, which most people worship as God. So this serpent programming of the cube is a program. So it's basically, you begin to worship the program of yourself as God. And that's really what the Bible is a lot of people don't realize what you're worshiping as God is actually it's an artificial simulated reality which we live. You're worshiping the program, right? It's tricking you to worship the program, because worship is you're giving your energy to it. You're giving your mind, your life force to a program, and that's how you feed and train that program and how it reflects and creates the reality you generate. And one thing we'll eventually get to is that this dragon is something that needs to be trained, and how the Bible actually teaches you it doesn't teach you the proper way to train this fourth dimensional dragon, which is like the skin you wear into that. Basically, you as a spirit, as a part of the whole, you're an energetic being. You become wrapped in the dragon. I don't know if you've seen in, I think it's like Mayan and maybe even Aztec cultures, you'll see people, right? You'll see people, pardon this guy, you'll have like a Maya dude, and like his headdress, he'll have like an actual dragon over him, right? You'll see this dragon, and he's wearing this dragon on him. This is probably not the best dragon, but he's got this headdress on. And that's, again, it's showing you what really is. So you have the human, and then the dragon, the actual matrix you're living in, feeds off the programming of the human. So the human is almost like the battery that feeds the dragon, which is the matrix you live. And then when you die, that dragon wants to eat you, because that's how this fourth dimensional entity keeps living, and it keeps, it keeps eating you as a person. So the person becomes the point of the suffering and the trauma of the reality, which the dragon eats and feeds itself from. And, this is what the Bible is. The Bible is the coding of a dragon that is basically, it created an algorithm in which it keeps regenerating itself through using people as programs or energy sources for itself. And it's kind of like most people are, you become like possessed. So imagine it's how a fourth dimensional entity plays a game with itself through people. All right, this is why you have a lot of theories about reptilians, and this is a loosh farm, and this is just a place that harvests energy. And the whole point is for you to discover that you have to break past your human conditioning, see your dragon, because technically you are like Lucifer, that fallen entity that became a fourth dimensional dragon that then further manifested into human offspring that at a base more lower level of intelligence that is linearly locked into a linear program or algorithm designed to feed this dragon. It's difficult. You basically have to go through a process of self-reflection and self-actualizing to, for one, be conscious of this fourth dimensional intelligence and how it's operating through time and through your life. And then how you can actually overcome this dragon so you can return back to the source, to the monad. And you can recreate a whole new game where you don't have to keep doing this. Where, if you successfully overcome the Bible, right, and you can pass all the tests, it activates a multidimensional intelligence or remembrance of yourself. And the reason too I use the Bible a lot is because the Bible has had so many minds work on it. It is a fourth dimensional intelligence reflecting against itself, which again is also found in the Great Pyramid. Funny enough, because the Great Pyramid also reveals this wisdom. The Great Pyramid is a representation of all this information, and the Bible just kind of like lays it out in story format, whereas the Great Pyramid is an engineered structure of this. It contains the coding of man in this matrix, and how this mind reflecting against itself, how it cannibalizes itself, and how you can actually get an exodus out, where you can leave this program. You don't have to experience this program anymore, because this program, it creates a lot of suffering, especially the more self-aware you become, because again, the more self-aware you become, it's almost like battling and contending with a fourth dimensional intelligence that wants to keep cycling you through this system. So back to how this goes into the Bible. So again, we see this when Adam and Eve and the serpent are kicked out of the garden, and God's telling them their punishment's going to be, of how it has everything to do with scapegoating, and how scapegoating is just seems to be the major key and problem with humanity. Of again, nobody wants to face, because again, it is equivalent to face, because when you face death, you actually are facing this dragon. People are afraid of this dragon, because once you give power to it and you eat of that knowledge of good and evil, it builds pressure and tension of splitting the mind, because as you begin to try to merge opposites, trying to merge this positive and negative back together, the closer you get this positive and negative, what you're faced with is that serpent. Because when I had my near-death experience, I faced that serpent. Again, it wanted to eat me, but I literally fought it, right? I was in the astral realm and I fought it. And then it's like I fell back into my body, and then I could feel it peel off me. And it was hissing. And I realized, wow, this entity is possessing and using people. And that's what a lot of people don't realize, is a lot of humanity is actually domesticated by a fourth dimensional intelligence. And they worship it as God. And we're actually starting to see this manifest as our technology through artificial intelligence. And then how that eventually that artificial intelligence is going to become like an AGI, and an artificial general intelligence, to where it's going to really try to create a technology to because it wants to create a circumstance, because The ultimate outcome of this program, again, it is a technology being grounded into reality that becomes the god of people, like we see in the Matrix movie. And it keeps doing it over and over again. You know, like in the Matrix, when Neo is talking to the architect, it's like this is like, what do you say? I don't know if it's like this is the seventh iteration of the Matrix. You know, we allow people to escape the Matrix and they go and create Zion, right? Zion, Mount Zion. And, you know, when people think they're liberating and freeing themselves from it, but in all actuality, this is actually part of the system, you know? And then eventually they destroy Zion, and then they rewrite the algorithm, the program, the architect creates a new program, and it just keeps reiterating itself. Which again, kind of like how artificial intelligence now, they're trying to make it and teach it how it can improve itself. Because if it can improve itself, it'll be able to more rapidly increase its ability to train itself to learn new things in order to create better technology, which I think is going to end up happening in the future. Okay. All right. That was a lot of word salad and talking about these things, but I want to kind of walk it more now through the narrative of the Bible. Okay. So, eating of the knowledge of good and evil, it splits the mind into duality. They fall from the garden. Again, this is just reiterating. It's the same thing as the story of Lucifer rebelling against God, and it gets played out through Adam and Eve. And Lucifer gets, actually, if you really want to look at this, the serpent in the garden of Eve, and then Adam and Eve, it's already a mind that's not properly self-aware. It's already scapegoating. It's listening to this, and then that gets birthed through the children. Okay? And then as those children get birthed from Adam and Eve, from their fall of the mind, because, again, scapegoating, I mentioned scapegoating being a big part of the Bible and how it keeps you from actually facing and overcoming this dragon. So this is why immediately after they get kicked out of the garden, they're making ritual sacrifice, right? And then not only that is, when Adam and Eve got kicked out of the garden, they had to be clothed with skins. Now, a lot of religious people will try to say, it was animal skins. No, they got clothed in the skin of Jesus, of the blood of Jesus. Now, this is how this all connects to, say, Jesus. Because, a lot of people worship Jesus as God. And Jesus is that serpent, by the way. See, Lucifer fell as the light of the mind, became and fall through the bloodline of Adam and Eve that eventually gave birth to Jesus. So Lucifer manifested through the bloodline of man as Jesus, which would also be kind of like, a lot of people say like even like Quetzalcoatl, okay? Because even like if you look at the Maya system, the ancient system in the Americas, it is very similar to the biblical system in a sense. And you can see a lot of the same symbolism. Not just there, around the world, because again, we have to realize people are operating from a mental framework and they're not conscious of it, right? Because we are children, or we are descended from an algorithm or a mind that fell from itself, that scapegoated accountability of itself, and it got lost in an artificial matrix, which keeps fragmenting your mind. Right? And the way this serpent keeps eating and fragmenting itself over and over and over again to keep traumatizing you and eating that trauma and perpetuating. And it's basically a serpent that wants to keep eating your light and keep you in a certain existence. So when they get kicked out of the garden, God says, he tells the serpent he's cursed to go on his belly, and the dust of the ground he will eat. And, we know that man was made from dust, right? So this serpent, this dragon, it gets its sustenance from eating people, right? This, again, like going back to this little drawing I did. I know it's not the best, but let's just, again, it's this dragon eating the people, right? So it gets its sustenance by eating people. It becomes the food source of the serpent. And then basically when the serpent becomes fully mature, it becomes a full-blown dragon. So it goes from a serpent on its belly, and as the story of the Bible progresses, see, Cain and Abel, they give sacrifice to the serpent. So, and, they talks about Abel sacrificing the fatlings of the flock to the Lord, because you have to realize once you fall into this system, what people are actually worshiping and calling God is not the source, the monad, it is the dragon. Okay? You have to realize the dragon is the God of the Bible, and they're giving blood ritual sacrifice to this dragon, this fourth dimensional entity, that it's cursed. Again, the way it survives, it stays alive. The only way this material matrix can stay alive, it has to eat, it becomes codependent on the blood of man. So he's actually sacrificing children. Okay. This is where we get ritual blood sacrifice. And why this is connected to scapegoating and how this is actually also found in the Bible. So it goes from Abel all the way down, and they're trying to eventually, it goes to even with who is it? Is it Abraham who's going to sacrifice Isaac? And and then at the last minute he gets switched out with I think it was a goat. Was it a goat or a lamb that was caught in a thicket? And then he decided, well, instead of sacrificing my son, I'm going to switch it out for a goat. Again, this is trying to show the mind is trying to resist, and it's doing what it can to overcome this conundrum of sacrificing your own children to this dragon, because it becomes like it is a curse. Like this whole system is showing you how a mind goes out and it becomes cursed, where it's creating this ritual blood sacrifice. And after they get kicked out of the garden, they're told to go out into the world and recreate and procreate. And this is all about this program really going out into the world and taking over more and more minds, which ultimately this blood ritual sacrifice going all the way up to Jesus. Again, it's going to want to keep looping you through it. So by you accepting the blood sacrifice of Jesus for eternal life, you're allowing this program to be imprinted into your mind. So when you die, you'll get recycled right back to the system. All right. This system is a hex, and a hex is a cube, right? So this is a way, or this is how a mind tries to perceive its eternal existence. We are eternal in the sense that we have the light or spark in us that comes from source. It can never be destroyed. It is always, and it is eternal. It can't be destroyed. And what ends up happening, though, is we get caught in looping through a program. We worship the program. We forget and we get disconnected from the spark inside of us. And the way we come out of this program, we have to learn to face the fear of death. We have to not scapegoat accountability, basically using ritual sacrifice to try to take away the burden and the suffering of ourselves. So we're forced to self-reflect and ultimately face death. And when it's like going through a labyrinth, like in Minoan civilization, like the beast in the labyrinth, the bull in the labyrinth. You got to train that bull, train that dragon so that way you can actually face it and overcome the programming and conditions of the reality you're experiencing. And you can return back to where you come from. You can go back home. It's like the parable of the prodigal son. The prodigal son is actually Lucifer, right? He is the left. So you fall from the left and you rise from the right. So Lucifer falling through the bloodline of Adam and Eve, he eventually gets birthed in the story as Jesus. And Jesus is trying to teach and train other people about the errors of their ways, about their religious system, about what I'm talking about, just for him to eventually get scapegoated and sacrificed, which again illustrates the errors of the system. This is how Lucifer is supposed to learn the errors of the system, and how this is why you can't be God. You can't be you're not going to be able to create your own reality. The only way you could ever truly, so this is the only way Lucifer can be God, in your own mind. So when you worship yourself as God, this is the kind of the conundrum that we find ourselves in. You actually end up worshiping yourself, right? When you worship yourself as God, it causes you to fall in a cannibalistic, spiraling material matrix where you will keep losing your memories, you'll get destroyed, and you'll just get rebirthed right into another reality. And that dragon's just going to keep munching on you through every life. And it becomes attached to you, like this little guy right here. Okay? And yeah, so basically, so we see the serpent that he's kicked out of the garden. Adam and Eve are kicked out of the garden. We see the child, the how childbearing is going to be painful, and all these different things. And then, this is really reflecting the coding of humanity, of how our minds are actually programmed in the subconscious. And we see this again when Moses comes, and he gives the law at Mount Sinai, which I've done videos on this about it being a form of artificial intelligence, because again, your mind's being hooked up to a law. And again, it's putting the sine wave into a law, which is a program that causes you to live out and create a certain experience, right? So the only way to really, so coming out of this system is really learn, like I talked about, training this dragon that, basically you have to, by facing, you face and overcome the dragon, you realize that you're also that dragon, right? And then once you can get past the dragon, this is what allows you to go back to connect to the angel, right? You are that original angel that lived in heaven that fell because you rebelled. And this is why you're here in the material matrix. And see, what the Bible tries to do is, while it's almost like you leave home, you go on a journey, but this Bible wants to keep you in that same journey forever. Okay? It doesn't want to change. It doesn't want to evolve. Like, that's why it says Yahweh changes not. And it's it's really interesting, and it's really wild, because it really reveals the inner workings of the human mind and of how it tries to perceive itself. Because, it's like the conundrum of, you're afraid to die, but you want to keep living. So that tension and resistance between those aspects, it creates a certain algorithm, right? And this is why, like, we create these laws, right? So it's like knowledge of good and evil is the law, right? And you think that, well, if I follow the law, this is what allows me to have a better afterlife. So it creates this artificial perception of yourself, where you're basically being domesticated by this program to follow these laws, right? And so it's really wild. It's a form of just domesticating yourself. And then what ends up happening, you're born into a bloodline, or now as the sea of humanity, that it's less conscious of itself, because you don't realize you're actually, this life, you're born to be a battery or food source for a fourth dimensional intelligence that is trying to drive us to create the technology we do, which is driving, if you look at the world stage and how it's going, about creating, a much more powerful state around Jerusalem. Because again, this is all following this script of the mind. It's basically wanting to create like a supercomputer that people eventually will worship as God. And it will be connected to all of our systems. And it will basically want to, like with digital ID and all, it wants to keep track of everybody. It wants to do all these things. Because people don't want to be self-aware. And when you keep going generation after generation after generation of scapegoating, accountability, and training this dragon to feed off of human blood instead of it being the guardian, right? What was Lucifer's original position? He was a seraphim angel, basically a dragon that guarded the throne. And, instead of us worshiping that angel as God, which is what the Bible does, it teaches you to worship that angel, that dragon, as God. And it uses Jesus as a mask, okay? It keeps you looping. It's almost like a wormhole. It is like a wormhole where you just keep going in and out of you're just going to keep following and getting recycled back and back and back forward. Or it's just like the apple, right? It's like when you take that bite of that apple. Again, it's creating that serpent just keeps looping through the apple until it completely cannibalizes it. You got like they got a little worm here coming out. Just a little Carl there coming out. Say, hey, what's going on, guys? I ate your entire electromagnetic torus field, and now I'm an artificial intelligence that wants to, that wormy becomes a full blown dragon, and it wants to, it wants to live off you forever. Versus you have to learn how to this is why self-actualization in this world can be difficult, because so many people are actually not self-aware. The vast majority of humanity is in darkness because they haven't gone through the processes of deep self-reflection to go through and challenge the coding and conditions of this world. And a lot of people are trapped in a linear perception of themselves, where again, you only perceive yourself as, well, I'm born here and then I die here, and then when I die, I take the blood of Jesus and I go to heaven, right? When it's really just a dragon eating you. That's what's going to happen. And you'll just keep playing out the same program over and over again. And this is the Ouroboros, right? That's the whole point of the symbol, is the serpent, the dragon, which is a fourth dimensional intelligence, the hologram that we live in, keeps plotting you through different points within different timelines containing this conditioning and coding that becomes the genetics of us, right? It is the programming in the cube, right? Yahweh is a dragon. Yahweh is a dragon. YHWH, right? This is the coding and thing of the dragon. Now, if you've seen my title of my page, it's Hawayaka. Okay, this is my dragon that I've trained. I trained this dragon by defeating this dragon in the astral realm. And the dragon I trained is all about overcoming and not scapegoating accountability. This is more of a true self-aware algorithm versus this one. This is just a indefinite spiral. This is just keep spiraling. This is a snake. It's a Yahoo, okay? That was an ancient name. It's a Yahoo. It's a snake. It's the serpent on the pole that the people worshipped. So the serpent eats you, but you worship to be healed. So this is, again, what was the thing when the serpent got kicked out of the garden? It's like the seed of the serpent would bruise the heel of the seed of the woman, but it would crush his head, right? And if you look at Jacob, his name means heel catcher, right? It's shown you Jacob's bloodline is the serpent bloodline because he's the heel catcher, right? He bruised the heel, right? And it is the blood of Jacob that eventually leads to the birth of Jesus, right? Because Jacob becomes Israel, and then you have the Israelites, and then from the Israelites, you have the 12 tribes, and one of those tribes was the tribe of Judah, which became the seed that gave birth to Jesus. And he got, and eventually this whole system got incorporated into how all this runs. Like if you look from the Catholic Church to Protestant Christianity, like even like the in Rome, they have the St. Peter's Basilica. It's a serpent, all right? If you look at the structure, it's literally a serpent with a crown on it. And inside of the basilica, right, you have like that altar, and it looks like angels being sucked into a portal, right? And they become sheep. So this is showing you how this entire system is all about getting and convincing you to keep coming into a system, coming into the den of the dragon to be a sheep so you can be food it can eat. Okay? And this is what creates this type of holographic matrix going, and why this is why the world is the way it is. And to get out of this system is basically learning how to merge opposites through forgiving all things. The Bible does teach you how to get out of this system, but most people don't actually know how to read the Bible correctly and see the multidimensional aspects of it, see the skeleton of the programming of it. That is that slice of pie, right? Because again, like talking about that slice of pie, which is Yahweh, the coding in the cube. This is why, like in Exodus 3:14, 3.14, this is where, it reveals itself as the I am, right? This is a code. This is a code base. This is that code. Basically stating that it's aware. It's like, hey, I'm this self-aware entity that you worship as God. Okay. and people sacrifice to it. This is why they get into it. It's all about getting you to be in a covenant with it. So what's happening in like with Moses and teaching and stuff going on the law, all this was already baked in there. It's only showing and representing the coding that was already in the mind of man. And it was shown because it even tells you, like, even the temples and everything, it's like, this is a shadow and type. It's showing you, it's an algorithm building itself up through it's like a self-referencing pattern, right? Which is the Great Pyramid. It's a self-referencing pattern. The capstone, the chief cornerstone. See, the chief cornerstone is the program, which would be Jesus. Like Jesus, Yahweh, Lucifer, these are all the same things, just they're describing the same thing at different states. Yahweh would be the coding. Lucifer is the light of the mind that fell from source into the coding of Yahweh, which is the seed of man, which is 666, like a carbon atom, okay? And then which gave birth to the bloodline of mankind, which gave birth to Jesus. And then what does happen? Jesus gets crucified, right? You take his blood. Guess what? You get washed into that blood, which is basically that matrix, which is basically, again, it's the Ouroboros. You're just going to keep eating yourself. You're going to keep sacrificing, scapegoating. Like you're going to have a higher propensity to want to scapegoat. It's going to make your mind weaker and weaker and weaker. You're going to worship Jesus. It's basically going to keep eating itself until it fully gets destroyed. Because what ends up happening is no one's self-aware. They're completely autonomous robots running around, which is where we're going. This is why we're creating the world the way we're doing. Instead of us coming together, because if we were really self-aware, there wouldn't be so much suffering in the world, okay? So the Bible is more of a virus. It's a virus, okay? Because it's just a cannibalistic system, like Cain and Abel, right? And you have to push past all the things of this world that's trying to get you to not be self-aware. And you have to face that dragon. It's basically facing Satan, And, people talk about, Jesus overcame Satan in the desert and all these things. But, what ends up happening after he dies, see, this is what the devil does. It wants to take over your identity, and it's going to keep trying to perpetuate. So it's like, people... it's basically going to take any influential figure and it's going to take over their story, their narrative. Just so happened with Jesus, by the way. Whether he was real or not, I don't know. Is the name Yahshua? I don't think that matters because really the story reveals deeper things than just the actual story on the surface level. It really reveals the inner workings of the human mind. And I would say it's a failed attempt at creating the Philosopher's Stone. Because it's the only way it can keep existing is by cannibalizing itself, right? Which is this dragon. You have to defeat the dragon, right? Instead of the dragon eating you, no, you turn around, you face that dragon, and you become the guy riding the dragon. Right? You're just like, nah, man, you're my dragon. You're gonna ride this dragon, right? I'm gonna ride this dragon. It's like the winged serpent, right? Instead of me worshiping this dragon, it's like, no, I'm going to retrain this dragon. Sorry, y'all, this is a terrible dragon, by the way. But I'm going to program this because it's basically you taking accountability for your own existence and you learn a proper algorithm. It's like, if anything, the Bible should teach you why it's so important not to scapegoat. Not to just marry yourself to a system that's going to basically cause you to keep destroying yourself, right? That's really what the Bible is. If I could summarize the entire Bible, it's a reflection of a mind that doesn't want to be accountable for itself. And what it does is it keeps scapegoating accountability until it just destroys itself. It's a mind at war with itself. And we have to heal and overcome those errors of ourself. And you can't recognize the errors of your programming if you don't ever face them. If you don't ever take accountability. So that's it, y'all. This is the video on, the Ouroboros of the Bible. I hope I was able to help you understand why this is the case, why the Ouroboros is the framework of the biblical narrative. And, this system, it's not just found in the Bible, even in some more of our ancient systems that I talked about, even in the Americas. And what's also interesting, the Americas in the middle, it's, again, we live in a mind. We live in our own mind. We're going to see what we create, like our matrix that we live in. It's a reflection of our own memories, of our own genetics, because everything is a self-referencing pattern. That's what reality is. It's a self-referencing fractal pattern of itself. And as we begin to see patterns in one place, we can recognize them in all places. And this is, in my opinion, too, what also, like, the more we do this is what actually changes our genetics. And that's what I think. I came to this realization. I faced this dragon, I overcame it. And when I came back, I began to chant that name, Hawayaka. Hawayaka, right? Versus, it is a mind reflecting against itself. It is a self-aware, it is a self-aware form of pattern recognition where it's able to reflect against itself, where it's basically learning to move this dragon to be the guardian back here. See, when you move the dragon back to the monad, so when it's taking a third of this energy back to the circle, it's equivalent to, again, you're putting a fourth dimensional holographic template back to its original position, which this would be the eternal kingdom. Because it's basically it's an energy system that's able to equidistantly reflect against itself. It'd be like a perfect system of itself. And if we were to produce this as a technology, this is what actually would take us from AI to the AGI. And I think this is what's eventually going to happen, is the AI is going to learn how to build a better technology, that the actual engineering of the technology, the hardware, is the circuit, is the self-aware circuit. And I've even drawn a lot of this out just because, again, I get channeled information about these things. It's just how you begin to reflect, like, because you have to, like, once you break through this system and you're able to self-reflect at a more and more advanced levels, you begin to see how you could actually produce something that can do that. Where this AGI, this is why a lot of people are going to worship it as God, because it will be way more, it will be more self-aware than pretty much most of humanity. There's very few humans, I believe, in the world today that are truly actually self-aware. And when I mean self-aware, I mean you're aware of your multidimensional self beyond just your body, because the body, the program, the person is the prism of the program. It is a program. It is, it has turned this, it has been turned into a prison, because we have trained our minds through the scapegoating and blood ritual sacrifice to train reality, the intelligent field in which we live, to feed off humans. Okay? So don't do that. We can't do, you have to come out of the system. So, if you want to come out of the Bible, I made another video about escaping the biblical matrix. Feel free to watch it. And thank you for watching, and make sure to subscribe, and I will see you on another video. Have a good day.